I'm Yeoman Warder Andy Merry, one of 37 Yeoman Warders, or Beefeaters as you might know us as, who have the honour and the privilege to not only work in this beautiful royal palace, but I also live here, so you're very, very welcome to my home. For the next 4.5 hours, we're going to be walking around my home, where I'll be pointing out some of the more historic buildings, telling you some stories about their history. So our story begins way back on the 14th of October 1066, when William the Duke of Normandy, better known as William the Conqueror, defeated the Anglo-Saxon King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. William was crowned King William I of England on Christmas Day of that same year, but he had to continue to fight his Saxon subjects, who weren't particularly impressed with Norman domination. He came here to London and he built a small wooden palisade in what was then the southeast corner of Roman London, but in 1078 he instructed that his first royal palace and fortress be built here in this country. Today we refer to it as the White Tower, and it's behind those buildings over there. It's behind the buildings, you can't see it. We'll see it later in the talk. Over the next 200 years, successive monarchs continued to add to the defences. The inner Ballymore defensive wall, we'll see it shortly just through there, was constructed by King Henry III in around 1220. His son, King Edward I, was responsible for building the outer wall there behind you in 1280, and he was also the man who had this moat dug. It's 120 feet wide, it was obviously once filled with water. Now I just said this was the first royal palace and fortress built here by the Normans. Over the years though, it's been used for many other purposes. This is still the place we keep safe the crown jewels and the royal regalia. We've done that since 1303. The wall behind you used to contain the Royal Mint. This is where all coins of the British Empire. Brits, put your hands up. Right, we had an empire, didn't we? Everybody else could get over it. Let's have some pride in our nation. That's why we had a referendum a few weeks ago. This is where all coins of the British Empire. Were designed and produced until 1810. It was the site of the first Royal Observatory. They used to study the stars and planets from here. It was then moved down to Greenwich in the 17th century, where it remains to this day. All weapons and ammunition of the British military were produced and stored here at the Tower, and we also used to have a zoo, a royal menagerie, kids. Foreign kings and queens would give our kings and queens gifts. Lions, tigers, leopards, elephants, there's even been a polar bear here at the Tower of London. These were all moved in 1832 to Regent's Park to form what we now know as London Zoo. But nobody's come here because they're interested in animals, guns, ammunition, or indeed coins. You're only here for three things only. I know this for a fact. You're here for the murder, the torture, and the execution. Right or not? Right, look up there, you sit lot. That piece of high ground is known as Tower Hill. Tower Hill was the scene of numerous executions between the 14th and the 18th centuries. During those years, no less than 125 men of noble birth to lose their heads up there by means of the block and the axe. The first victim was a man called Simon Sudbury. Simon Sudbury was the Archbishop of Canterbury. He was staying in the Tower during what became known as the Peasants' Revolt in the year 1381. Now, despite the Tower being designed and built to keep out entire armies, peasants, armed with nothing more than pitchforks and some aggression, got inside the Tower. They got hold of the Archbishop, dragged him to the top of the hill there, and they murdered him. His crime was that he dared to introduce a thing called the poll tax, something that we still suffer from to this very day in this country. Now, the last man to die up there was in April of 1747. He was also called Simon Fraser, the Lord Lovett. He was an 80-year-old Scottish lord who had supported the Second Jacobite Rebellion led by Bonnie Prince Charlie in 1745. Bonnie Jocks here, any Scots people? Hello, you're very welcome. Simon Fraser was a fat, odious Scotsman, and we hated him here in this country. Now, when he was taken from the town, marched to the top of the hill there, you couldn't have failed to notice over there in the northwest corner of the moat a large wooden grandstand. This was built so that even more Englishmen could watch him die. Got to the top of the hill, he placed his neck on the block, and as the executioner raised his axe, the crowd went wild with excitement. They jumped up and down on that grandstand, which duly collapsed. It collapsed backwards into the moat. This drowned nearly 30 people. That was said to have amused Simon Fraser so much so that as the axe passed through his neck, he was said to be laughing. He quite literally laughed his head off. Right, yeah, I know. Right, let's pause and imagine the scene then up there on a day of an execution. Thousands of people would have gathered to watch the proceedings. Now, what I'm about to say, if you're a kid, and definitely if you're under 25, is so horrific and upsetting, you might want to stick your fingers in your ears. This is nasty. Now, in those days, there was no internet. No TV, kids, no Xbox or PlayStation. This is absolutely true, by the way. No Twitter, no Facebook. The horror. But, don't worry, your parents then, as I'm sure they still do, would have taken you to a public execution. It's a family day out. You've had a picnic, a nice rug to eat it off. There'll be dancing bears, jugglers, men on stilts. Everybody's having a great time, all except for one man. He's taken from the tower by us, the yeoman warders, and marched halfway up the hill there. There we would have handed him over to the sheriffs of London, who took him the rest of the way. As he was marched up there, he'd have been booed and jeered. He'd have been pelted with rotten fruit, vegetables, cow dung, horse dung, anything else unpleasant to hand. It was a very nasty experience indeed, apart from the obvious conclusion to his mourning. Now I'd get to the top of the hill and see a raised platform or scaffold on which was stood a man in a leather mask. Now this isn't what some of you ladies are now thinking about or indeed hoping for at this point. This was of course the executioner. He'd get on top of that platform, he'd put a small purse of money in the executioner's hand, he'd deliver a final speech, he'd say some prayers, he would then place his neck down on the block. He would then give a word or a signal and the executioner would bring down his axe, hopefully beheading his victim with one stroke, although that wasn't always the case. More about that later. The executioner would then pick up the severed and still bleeding head. This was a point of law. He had to demonstrate to the crowd that justice had been served. He would then loudly proclaim to that crowd, "Behold, the head of a traitor. So die all traitors, God save the King." Now this was the bit the crowd had come to see. They loved it. They would repeat that last phrase, "God save the King," before going absolutely wild with excitement. Shall we try it? No expectations. Right, you ready? God save the King! God save the King! Some Americans here, aren't there? The head was then taken down. It was boiled in tar. This was to preserve it. It could last for anything up to 25 years like this. It was also covered in the spice cumin. Now birds don't like the spice cumin, and this stops them from pecking out the eyeballs and the flesh from the severed head, which was then placed onto a soldier's pike, carried through the streets of London in that direction towards London Bridge. That is not London Bridge. It's got two towers. It's next to the Tower of London. I don't know how easy you want us to make this. That bridge is called Tower Bridge. London Bridge is in that direction. It's the first one you come to. And in those days, it was the only bridge across the Thames. So the heads were left displayed above the gateway entrance, a sign of the fate that would await all would-be traitors. Meanwhile, the headless corpse was taken down, placed into a small handcart, and brought back inside the tower, where it was buried in an unmarked grave in our chapel. Right, should we go inside? Yeah, right. Now you need to make a gap for me to get through there. We're going up through that arch. Let's go. Right.